Hello, I wanted to do a video showing how I make my Ita bags, because I do get a couple questions from friends about how exactly I do my inserts and how I do my Ita bags in general, so I thought I would make a bit of a video on that. So just as a preface, this is generally what my Ita bags look like. I have inserts on the inside. I don't tend to use just the base bag anymore to pin my stuff onto, but I will also hang keychains so I can show you how to do that. However, I do not have any experience with making like the clear bags or any sort of grapevine or card paper things in my Ita bags, so this is all I have to work with as far as my knowledge and expertise. So I'll show you how I make my inserts, and I think the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go in with any tips and tricks I have if I can think of any. So yes, I will be making my Natsuki bag today, the one everyone's probably most excited for. So to start off, I make a stencil, I guess. I trace kind of the inside of my bag, and I make a template as close and accurate as possible to the shape of the bag. This one I would need two for because it has two separate pockets. And since I use this bag for a bunch of different inserts, I already have my template made. So I typically will just trace these onto a new sheet of foam, and I use this thin foam. This is the brand I got, but it really can be anything. It's just these thin sheets of foam that I take, and you can get them all sorts of sizes and brands and stuff, so as long as it's like not too thick, not too thin, then it should work just fine. Because if it's too thick, you can't put things like enamel pins on them, but if it's too thin, they might flop over or, you know, just fall apart. So I tend to go for about a middle size if I can. And then this color foam doesn't really matter in the way that I do it. I put fabric over it. And the reason I put fabric over my foam is because if I need to take a pin off and put it back in, it's gonna leave like a hole in the foam that you can see, whereas if it has the fabric on it, you can't really see where the holes are. So that is why I personally put fabric over it. It does look nice because I can put whatever kind of pattern I want on the back, but truly, personally, I like something a bit more understated for the backs of my inserts, but if you want something more extravagant, you can also do that as well. That's why I like using fabric on top. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna outline it just in pencil. It doesn't really matter though, because once again, we're gonna be covering this up with our fabric. So as long as you can see it, it doesn't really matter. I think if you want to get into any more extreme things, not extreme things, but intricate things, you can watch my Masato bag, because I did things a bit differently with that one, because I had to work with different kinds of merchandise, which I think is also an important thing to take into consideration when you're making your Ita bags. And buying a bag in general is, you know, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in what you see online and then just try to copy that without really thinking about your own budget and what Ita bags will mean to you. Because I know when I first started making my Ita bags, I was like so nervous and embarrassed to take them out, when it's like I spent so much time and money on this. Like, I really should only be doing things if I'm actually going to use it. So I know a lot of people will only use their Ita bags for convention, which is like totally fine, but I think, you know, taking that in consideration with your budget is also important. Whereas I know some people will already have the merch and then want to put it on an Ita bag just to use up that merch, which is also a good option. But if you're just getting into Ita bags for like the sake of Ita bags, I don't know. I think it's definitely not a hobby that, you know, is really easy on the wallet sometimes, especially for certain fandoms or like character text and stuff like that. Ita bags, it can be easy to think, oh, I don't have enough for an Ita bag, then just buy a smaller Ita bag. You know, there are plenty of different shapes and sizes. Like, you really want something that is gonna work with you. Now that we have our foam cut out, we grab our fabric. And you can literally get this fabric from like anywhere. Like, I know the dollar store has it, like Walmart. Any kind of fabric will do. I get like just the cheap thin stuff, and it works totally fine. These are like $1, you know? Especially if you're looking for a basic color, you really don't need to ball out for a lot of money. Because once again, if it's too thick, it's going to be too much for your pins to go poke through. So, quite honestly, the thinner the better, in my opinion. I know some people are picky, but this is what I find works for me and the style of bag that I do and the wear and tear that I have. I don't really reuse my inserts, but I reuse my bags. That's another thing to consider when you're working with your Ita bags. Is, you know, you can have multiple inserts for the same bag. When I'm cutting my fabric, I just go like a tiny bit overhang, just like that, about like 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch, nothing too crazy. And then when you're cutting, it also doesn't have to be any sort of neat or anything, because all of that's going to be on the back. It's going to get covered. And then what I like to do is I take these little, what's it called? I don't know, sewing pin thingies. And I take this, and then, okay, it is also important because sometimes when you draw these out, and your bag is obviously made of fabric, so it's going to be, some sides are a bit like lopsided, so you want to make sure that the right way is facing, like, has this on top, has the right side of the fabric on top. So I'm gonna test it in my bag first, because I know my bag is definitely very lopsided and funky, because this was a cheap bag. I personally don't think the WeGo bags are worth a lot of money, because I have one and it is not my favorite in the world. So, oh, that's another thing. You want to test it in case it's too big. This one is a little too wide on the edges. Actually, it should be fine. See, a good fit. You don't need the most expensive brand of Ita bag out there, because, you know, you want one that you actually like the look of. I think that's what's most important, is you want one that you're actually going to take out and, you know, be proud to walk around with and comfortable walking around with. Like, I don't always like small bags, so working with a small purse, like, I'm not going to take that out very often, because I don't usually wear small bags, even if it's not an Ita bag, you know? This backpack is a pretty comfortable size for me, and it works well with the amount of merchant I have, so that's why I like this one the most for making multiple inserts for. So I think that's definitely something to consider when you're trying to buy your first Ita bag. Okay. And then I take these pins, and I just fold the fabric over, and I pin it in place. And I do that around the whole thing. And you don't want this to be too tight, because if it's too tight, then the fabric will kind of make it go like this, which is not good. So you want it to be nice and flat, but still taut, so the fabric doesn't, you know, there's not too much loose fabric or anything. You just want to be gentle, but still make it accurate. You can do as little as 4, or like you can go around the whole thing. It depends on my mood for the day. These corners, if you have like a rounder bag like this, it can be a bit difficult. Once again, it doesn't matter too much, because all of your ugly stitching is going to be in the back. That's where all this like bunched up fabric is going to go. So you don't have to worry too much about making it look super pretty on the back. So now that I have them pinned, personally I just go for a pretty light thread. You can choose whatever color you want, but just keep in mind that you will kind of be able to see it, because it'll be on the edges, at least the way that I stitch. I am not very good at sewing, so I, you know, try my best to be careful. Personally, I just go with white thread, because there's white polka dots on my fabric, so. And then I just take this, and I go all the way around, and I sew very basically. It doesn't have to be anything crazy unless you don't want it to be. If you are better at sewing, obviously you can use whatever stitch you want. this is the only stitch I know, so this is what I'm using. And I will show you guys, for those of you who also don't know how to sew. So take it, start wherever, it doesn't really matter. But I start in the back, so then the knot goes in the back. I just have my thread folded over and then a knot at the back here. And just poke through. I like to give it a little bit, like maybe a centimeter of a border. And you just go through one way, and then maybe about a centimeter, go back. Another centimeter, go through. And back. And I am not too precious or neat about this because it's just the border and it's gonna get covered with pins and stuff, so you're not gonna see it much. It doesn't super matter. The corners can be a bit tricky. I just try to get as much fabric as I can in them. And also for these parts that aren't pinned, I also try to make sure that I pull it a little bit so it stays nice and tight. And keep going. Nothing to it. I will pause and resume once I'm done sewing. Alright, so I finished sewing them. So I can't really tell too much, but I'm gonna, when you're done sewing, you're gonna be left with a bunch of the extra fabric. So I just cut it off just because it gets a bit bulky around the corners. Because like it's okay to fold it around the corners like this so it gets a bit more cleaner in the front, but you know, it's just a bit bulky so it doesn't lay flat. So I like to cut it personally. I leave a bit extra so it doesn't like slip out or anything, but I do still cut it. It doesn't have to be neat, because once again, it's in the back. And there you go. You can obviously iron your fabric first, but I don't really care because it's just going to get covered by pins. And now we're able to move on to the fun part. If you've seen my other Eat a Bag videos, you know I like to kind of plan out where my pins are going to go on the bag, just for a general idea. Like I said, planning it not only in as far as what size is going to go where is important. Typically I don't do this stuff where I try to put them exactly where I'm going to want them, because you know, I just make up that on the fly, but I did it this time just because it's a bit of a different setup, so I really wanted it to look nice. I'm going to just start putting them on. There's not really any special trick to this. I think because it's so flimsy and bendy, it's easier to use even like these kind of pins. I know some people don't like that, but with this kind of insert, it works just fine. I just take it, and then because these go up and down, it can also help as far as if you make a bit of a mistake, it doesn't end up, you don't have to always unpin it and then repin it again. I also tend to like to work around the border first, sometimes, at least just lining up some sides, because that's where a lot of the measurement comes in, and you want to make sure everything fits the right way. And you have everything planned out as you're pinning them, instead of, you know, possibly making a mistake and then having to redo a lot. It also helps to not really take a lot of the insert when you're pinning, so then you can move the pin left and right. And since it's that kind of safety pin, you can move it up and down. So I have all of my can badges on, and I'm gonna double check it in my bag first. I like to check it pretty frequently, just in case, you know, I need to move anything. Yeah, because mine kind of has this lip here. It's supposed to hold kind of thicker things, so it kind of covers the bottom a little bit, but I think it's fine. So I'd like to put keychains on, and to do so, I highly suggest getting these safety pins. And the way that I think is best to use them is to go through the back, so the most of the safety pin is hidden. And that works for really any kind of keychain, in my opinion, or in my experience. So even if it's one like this where it doesn't really have much, you just will go through the back, and you have to kind of, this part's a little hard. So I'm gonna put it like right over here. So I poke through from the back, hook this in, and then put it back through. So most of the safety pin is hidden, and you just get this little bit here to hold the keychain. And even sometimes, if you want to, like, I want to hang it like right here, but it's covered by this pin. So what I do is sometimes I just open the safety pin on the pin, and then I use that instead. And I hook it on, and close it up, and then bam, it'll hang down. Alright, so that is how I do my Ita bags. I hope this helped you guys at least a little bit. No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and I think it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. It took me a long time to do my first couple Ita bags just to get in the practice of putting pins on, but it's much easier now. I think especially with an insert like this, it makes it easier to put the pins in. So I think it's just more important to find what works for you. And yeah, find a design that you like. Some people I know like the grapevines, which is, you know, obviously is still an option even for this kind of bag and insert. So just do as you please. I think with Ita bags, there's no real rules. So I hope this at least helped a little bit though.